And what was a 114-105 win to clinch a return to the East Finals, the Indiana Pacers slayed the Cleveland Cavaliers as a staggering giant, not only holding the league's most efficient pick-and-roll team during the regular season to their worst pick-and-roll efficiency in any game this season, as Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland both limped to the finish, but also in out-targeting the opposition to such an extent that Jarrett Allen finished from the bench, toppling the double big lineup once and for all. Here to discuss it all, my favorite basketball writer / talker, a clean-shaven Samson Folk.
I can finally play for the Yankees now that I have the. Or actually, they banished that rule this year finally,
I
so you
saw
can
that.
have a beard on the Yankees. Uh, for many people who know, if you want to see the process of me getting shaved, it's on my Twitter. I had
That's such a weird sentence.
the full goatee. It was scary because I've spent a lot of time sitting across from Nick Nurse, and I felt like I was looking into him when I was looking in the mirror, and I was like, "Oh, buddy, no, thank you." The Pacers win. I'll say quickly, the Pacers. It's a long held belief for me. The Pacers are a misunderstood team. There's a reason that every time they come into these series, and even against the Celtics last year, it feels like people can't believe how they're performing. They can't believe that they're punching up. It's because they are seen as like Tyrese is their avatar, and Tyrese is seen as kind of like a one-note player and seen as like a finesse player. This playoffs, not only was Tyrese better at hanging in defensively, but he was more adaptable, and the team was more adaptable, and they were already adaptable last season. This is a team that, when push comes to shove, wins a lot of the physicality matchups, wins a lot of like the grit and grind matchups. And that is a very underrepresented aspect of this team as far as like how it's talked about. They're gritty as hell. And yes, Tyrese can go 5 for 6 from downtown in no time at all. Miles Turner can have a great shooting game. Pascal Siakam is as talented a finesse player as ever. Andrew Nembhard can run one of the best pick and rolls in the NBA. Aaron Nesmith is a running back at times, but also a svelte ballerina navigating things. It's just they figure things out. And it's not, despite what you suggested with the mustache commentary, I'm not surprised to see them come out of the second round
So what you're
for the second
saying
year in a
here
row.
is that perhaps we should credit the winners instead of clowning the losers.
I like the Cavs so much. I love that team. I I did like with Bob from Fox Sports, we did a preview podcast at the start of this season, and I talked about how much I loved the Cavs team, but he also said like pick a team outside of the certain range of bets that could make it to the finals, and I was like the Pacers. And I love both these teams. I'm obviously very happy to see the Pacers come out on top, but yeah, I do. It does bug me, and the Pacers are obviously on the other side of this over the last 2 seasons. Is that like everyone who loses the Pacers is fraud watch, but it's the Eastern Conference Finals for the second year in a row. How you square that, I don't know, but I like crediting winners personally.
It's kind of an interesting juxtaposition between the two, and we'll get into this a little bit, but the culmination of this series almost being that the Cavs didn't get to be the team that they were, somewhat because of injuries, but also
Mm-hmm.
because of things that the Pacers were doing that made them seem as though they were going to be a contender in the postseason. And the things that the Cavs did against the Pacers almost enhanced the things that lead you to believe that the Pacers could be a contender. In that, I'll just throw the number out there right now. The Cavs logged 224.2 passes per 100 possessions in Game 5. That's the fewest of any game in this series. They averaged 250.6 for the series. The 30th ranked team in the NBA averaged 273.9.
Yeah.
So they weren't just last. They were, well, many rungs below last in passes per 100 against the Pacers. And in a way, it was like when we watched everything that the Cavs did against Tyrese through 5 games, the Cavs were very clearly communicating, we want to take out the strongest link and force the weakest links to beat them, which in a sense is that's the play style that the Pacers prefer to play. In a way
Mm-hmm.
that just feeds into what Tyrese does, although in this game, he broke from that a little bit. And conversely, the Pacers took a look to take away the weakest links and force the strongest links to beat them. And a wise strategy, given that the strongest links weren't all that strong in terms of how hobbled they were by game 5. And like I said, what made them into a contender, or at least how they projected as a contender during the regular season, with their emphasis on flowing through actions, their ability to make the extra pass, that stuff was gone. So kind of a continuing trend of these playoffs again being the weakest link era, more so than the strongest link era, and the Pacers, in fact, being the avatar of that, and that kind of banging against why people have sometimes, not even so much the teams that they're beating are frauds, but the Pacers being a fluke.
Yeah. It's also like it's every like maybe it's, maybe it's like this era of war or siege war or whatever, like any movie or book you read, it's like the defense wants to funnel towards something. And at least in this series, which is why we liked it better than the Celtics as a matchup, is like there is a chance for Miles to hang in and play against other bigs. And Nembhard gets to just sit directly on one of like either Garland or Mitchell. It ended up being Mitchell a ton. And if you are going to make sure that the Cavs don't pass a lot and you're going to funnel them towards one thing, it's like, who is your stopper? Andrew Nembhard, who 2 rounds in has a real case for, well, once the Eastern Conference Finals start, he will have a case for like top 3 defensive guard remaining comfortably. And that's a hell of a thing to be able to do. And also on the other side, he's running one of the best pick and rolls in the NBA. And part of that is because the Pacers are comfortable playing 4-on-4, are very diligent in their spacing and their flow, and they know where they want to get the ball. They're not afraid to let the guys at the back end of the starting 5 or the front end of the bench take a bunch of possessions and see where it lands them. Well, it lands them in the Eastern Conference Finals once again. Fun.
Yeah, and a big part of the reason they're so comfortable playing 4-on-4 is because they have another point guard, the caliber of Nembhard, to be able to do those things. But also, like, and I think that it's true, like Donovan Mitchell certainly has been a playoff riser throughout his career on every team that he's been on. But I think that there was also kind of this idea that he was getting the numbers that he was getting because no one on the Pacers could stop him. And certainly that was the case. We looked at certain quarters where, like, look at all the different things that they tried and none of it particularly worked. But also, in a sense, that was the strategy that the Pacers were willing to put forward. That we're going to take away the passing avenues. We don't think that you're going to look to make those passing avenues. And if that's the way that we lose, then that's the way that we lose. So, like, just a difference in approach. But I thought for a bit, Samson, that the beginning of this game was feeling quite a bit like the beginning of the last elimination game against the Milwaukee Bucks. So one possession that stood out, and I only am showing this again. I looked at it before and after to show how things later progressed. I was concerned toward the end of the first quarter after Tyrese had returned with his, early foul trouble that they were very quickly in this game. Siakam, a very frequent screener, which we'll talk about later. Anytime one big was on the floor, they were trying to get that big out on the perimeter, hence why he sent that early screen. But he has Dean Wade on him. He spends the whole entire possession standing behind Dean Wade. They reverse it. Andrew gets it back. He drives the big into the paint to try to get that sink. Very easy opportunity here for Miles Turner to have flared Tyrese into space so that Tyrese could attack through that closeout, but they don't get to that. Finally, Miles is driving. The ball has barely grazed the paint this entire possession until Nembhard has to throw up a deep clock 3. And I thought to myself, that looks a lot like what was happening at the start of the game against the Bucks when it seemed like there was a force field around the paint. And in a sense, this game did turn out a lot like the game 5 against the Bucks. They trailed by as many as 19 points and they ended up coming back to win it. Lots of things to have issues with between the Haliburton 2 early quick fouls. I was a little bit like, I don't know if you need to pull out Tyrese when he has 2 quick fouls because I don't know that he's necessarily going to foul out. There was a lot of slow reads from Benedict Mathurin in the first quarter. There was Obi Toppin getting hunted in the first quarter. There was a lot of bench woes in the first half. Just not a lot of whole gumption overall that had to quickly turn. So
you and I had somewhat different responses to the start of the game because that juxtaposition of like game 5 Bucks, game 5 Cavs, not very famously, I mean, we're a regional sports podcast, but I was like tearing my hair out basically, although I would shave it later. I was very frustrated during the Bucks game, the start. I was like, I can't believe what I'm watching. And during this game against the Cavs, game 5, the start, I felt quite a sense of calm. And I was like, this is going to shake out and this is going to work well. And even despite like Toppin getting hunted a little bit and Pascal not making shots, I thought that their willingness to like go at the basket and try the bigs repeatedly, although it didn't work out incredibly well, I thought was an important indicator. And while not a bellwether of hot girl basketball, I thought a bellwether of winning basketball. And in the numbers, I don't think that bears out. But as a watcher, I was looking at that and thinking, this is a good indicator. The shooting will come around. During my write-up, I called it a windfall is needed. And then the wind fell. A gale of Haliburton, just craziness. So I didn't feel too bad about it. Things weren't breaking the right way, but I think these Pacers have elicited a sense of calm in me that I've not had with the team in some time. For people who know the other team,
this is good because I like it when we slightly disagree, because I actually felt after the first quarter that I wanted them to try the bigs less and I wanted them to try the guards a lot more. And in fact, they did try the guards a lot more, and that was kind of what, like, again, another dichotomy between the two teams. The Cavs were hunting who they thought was the weak link for the Pacers, being Tyrese Haliburton, and not finding a lot of traction there. And the Pacers eventually were like, you know what? If Darius Garland's having to run in circles just to keep blood flowing to his toe, and Donovan Mitchell's like kind of hunched over every other play, maybe that's where we should look instead of some of what was going on in the first quarter. So I kind of felt like that was ultimately why they found some traction. But
that's 100% why they were very specific in hunting the Cavs guards. That was the whole run, definitely.
So let's show the two sides of it. So the Cavs on their side of things, to provide some numbers that Samson already mentioned and that I mentioned in the little opening monologue that I did, the Cavs were the most efficient pick and roll team in the NBA during the regular season. They scored 0.746 points per chance out of the pick and roll in this basketball game. That's their worst mark in any game this season. That's one of the worst marks for any team this season. And Tyrese ended up guarding 18 picks as the screener defender in this game. That's his 5th most in any game this season. And yet the Pacers only allowed 0.529 points per chance while they were hunting down Tyrese. If I just told you that number based on what you saw last night, what would your first inclination be as to why they weren't getting points out of how often they were going at Tyrese? Or the pick and roll at large?
The pick and roll at large, like when I was watching back some of it, I thought the show and recover actually worked quite well when they were guarding like the Mitchell Strus actions. I thought that we've gone over some film in the past where Tyrese and the Pacers are not executing the show very well, and they seem quite mixed up, especially when tracking a shooter. It obviously helps that Strus shot 0 for 9. But Tyrese also, like, he has done a much better job. Big shout out to Big Media, S. Barahani. He tweeted out, like, teams have been looking for Tyrese and they've not found it. I think he also tweeted something similar about Brunson, those two big motivators of the playoffs so far. I thought that Tyrese has done a better job of letting his length cover up for some things. And I don't know exactly how to make this case about like his approach specifically, but it seems like his arms are getting into more spaces to, I guess, obscure passing lanes. His feet are moving, and like he's not the fastest player compared to other guards. So maybe it's like the predictive aspect of his defense. He's doing a better job of sitting on tendencies from the other guards and playing them into the scheme. But the truth is, and I can't say it specifically, he hung in unbelievably well, which was a sight for sore eyes, definitely.
I actually felt a little bit differently in this game. I think that's the story of Tyrese's season as a defender, certainly. And I think that is what bared out in game 1, which I thought was one of the best defensive games he's ever played, when he got the 3 stops in a row against Mitchell and Strus late in that game, and Ty Jerome, all in different ways. And this one, I felt it was more about the insulation around him and the way that various players for the Pacers were protecting him when the Cavs were going at those. And also, just to be frank and honest here, like here's a case of Garland going directly at Tyrese. Garland just didn't have anything going off that left foot last night. Like, that was an incredibly limited basketball player running the pick and roll for the Cleveland Cavaliers last night. That being said, again, like very, third quarter going at Tyrese with Donovan Mitchell. He's getting past Tyrese pretty easily. Nembhard sinks down and gets his hand on that ball. Then, because they played Okoro as much as they did, it's a short closeout from Pascal Siakam. He's able to cut off that drive against Okoro. Then on the kick out, they're willing to give up the Evan Mobley three. Thomas Bryant still able to contest it. That's about Nembhard dropping down more than it is about Tyrese. Same thing similarly here. They want Tyrese. They're bringing Dean Wade up there, any low usage wing into the screening action. Tyrese playing almost in a drop. Aaron makes a great pass play to poke that from behind. The Pacers clinging to only a 2-point lead, and Aaron's doing folk hero, cult hero stuff here, getting that from behind and then finishing at the rim at the other ends. I felt too that
that's a terrible pass from Pascal, by the way.
Nembhard, sometimes they didn't even need to get to the show coverage completely because Nembhard did well enough fighting over the top that you could play Tyrese more below the screening action, force contested twos. I did like that, again, they didn't even necessarily get to the show that much, especially when he was defending Okoro, because they weren't doing a show and recover. They were literally playing Tyrese and drop. And then for Tyrese to kind of play the cat and mouse game and get his hand on the pocket pass as a drop defender, that was certainly what you're talking about in terms of him, getting his arms in passing lanes more often this year with deflections and whatnot. And then
that's also, just as a quick thing, we are in the thick of playoff basketball. Tyrese Haliburton is playing a drop and jumping on the bounce pass to the rolling Isaac Okoro. Is like, we're seeing different things here.
Basketball diversity. Here he gets pretty easily beat by Donovan Mitchell when he gets hunted again, but it's a good vertical contest by Miles. And then on the subsequent drive, it's another great contest from Miles. And they end up, this ended up being a shot clock violation because Max Strus had no idea what the clock was. So I actually thought it was a lot more about what pieces were around him. And that's why sometimes you and I don't do this, but it's very easy to get online and be like, because on the season, the isolation numbers for Tyrese are not that bad. Like, you can look at it and you'd be like, oh, this is a lot of growth from Tyrese in that area. And at times, I think on the whole, that's probably accurate. But also, it's like he's being hunted, and then there's a lot going on behind him that's protecting what those mismatches were. And that was certainly the case last night, where the Cavs definitely were trying to play the hunter with two players who I'm not entirely sure should have been empowered to play the hunter as much as they necessarily were. And then Nembhard, Nesmith, Miles Turner, Siakam making a lot of plays in and around that to assure that it didn't, get out of hand completely for the Pacers.
I also think the best indicator for isolation supremacy or improvement, I think, is the absence of numbers a little bit.
Yeah.
Suppressing that kind of stuff. OG Anunoby was, for years, when I covered him and looked at all of his stuff, the indicators were always tremendous as far as being able to suppress shots. I really like looking at those numbers because you guard in a 5-man capacity always. If you aren't, you probably are on one of the 5 worst defenses in the NBA. Also, as a quick thing too, this isn't guard centric, but I wrote it in my piece. It's also partially why I felt pretty good about the Pacers getting back into the game. Mobley isolations from the top repeatedly, where it's baby hook or crazy finish of the bucket, felt very strong that wasn't going to be the lifeblood of a winning operation. And it completely, the water got turned off eventually. He had his run, and credit to Mobley because his shot making in the series was actually pretty strong, but it just the Pacers coaxed bad offense out of the Cavaliers, and well done to them.
Strangely enough, I think if I were the Cavs, based on what the guard play was, I agree with you. I don't think that was necessarily a sustainable strategy, but I think that Evan Mobley could have stood to get a lot more touches in that game. I thought they could have stood to play through the bigs a lot more in that game than what they did. Because the Cavs kind of turned the water off to Evan Mobley themselves. 224 passes for the game. The top leading passing team our 30th ranked team had 270.
I don't trust it though.
I'm not saying I trust it, but do you trust it more than two guards who really were
I do.
Garland and Mitchell getting it done in this game? Other than when Mitchell finally popped off on pull-up threes, I think I would have rather funneled more of those touches through the bigs than what they did.
Garland, those guys caught, like Garland especially, caught a lot of rim on misses. I would, if I'm the Cavs,
because he couldn't launch off that foot.
But I'm telling you this, I know he was 4-16, but I am trusting those two over Mobley a million times. I don't care if I lose a million times. I have to do that.
Oh, I'm not saying he has to be the play finisher, but I would have allowed him to be a pivot point trigger player more than what they were doing. This was the worst pick and roll performance of their entire season, and they kept jamming that through.
I thought it could have swung a little bit with shot making. Like they got a bad shot making game. Make credit to the Pacers for obviously slowing things down.
If I was Kenny Atkinson and I'm seeing Garland running around in circles just to keep blood flowing to his foot every 2 seconds, Mitchell's going down the tunnel, coming back out the tunnel, and I don't know.
This is where we just I can't hand a game to Mobley. No, I can't do it.
Oh, I'm not saying dump it down and be like, hey, win this game for us off of Mobley hook shots, which was not an efficient play type, but he needed to get more touches than what he got. I feel pretty strongly about that.
More flow, certainly, but yeah.
So in the reverse, part of the reason why I felt like the Pacers needed to go at the guards and the Cavs needed to play through the guards less is because they weren't moving all that well. So while the Cavs weren't super successful at targeting the Pacers' weak link, the Pacers in the reverse were fairly successful, especially when they started to make their initial run in the second quarter, doing so against Mitchell, Garland. I mean, there was a certain point, which I'll get to here. First key point, which is not targeting their guards or anything necessarily in between. I know that Rick Carlisle said after the game that he felt like one of the biggest plays of the game was when Miles tracked down and got that block against Mitchell at the rim, and then Andrew Nembhard got a subsequent block. I actually felt like this particular contest from Miles was huge in the game. A block assist, as you know, not a stat that should be known as anything, but Aaron makes that running three. They ended up going on, I think, 24-12 run after that block from Turner and subsequent run out for Nesmith to get them back in the game by halftime. But what stood out to me was, again, Siakam setting a lot of early picks so that they could get one of the bigs on the perimeter against Tyrese. And then oftentimes it was immediately then go look for the other big. And now you're involving both of them in the pick and roll at the same time. And to be quite frank, in addition to going at the guards, Jarrett Allen wasn't exactly holding his head above water in a lot of these actions. Really, it became
more brighter than expected.
Yeah, really at a certain point, which maybe you will disagree with this too, but it kind of felt like everything was a mismatch for the Pacers other than Dean Wade. Other than displacing him and getting him somewhere else, it felt like pretty much anything they were going to pick on, the Pacers were going to have an advantage somewhere. Just like right here, Pascal goes up and sets that flare back screen on Mitchell so that Tyrese can get the ball into space. Jarrett Allen just ends up staying with Pascal, which makes Mitchell have to navigate out there. And that kind of obviously was part of the Tyrese flurry. Then just them getting stops at one end of the floor with Ben Sheppard staying in front of Darius Garland in isolation, another no pass possession for the Cavs. What they were doing in semi-transition put them in a lot of good spots as well, where, here, because they're off balance, he gets Evan Mobley out on the perimeter. He immediately relocates. And then Tyrese notices there was a cross match that came out from all of this. Let's just get Pascal Siakam in the post against Donovan Mitchell. And that's another advantage for us.
You can't hear the audio on that play, but Pascal bellowing, screaming for the ball as soon as he got Mitchell on him. He was like, we have an opportunity for 2 points here. And credit to, because you and I have belabored before, man, sometimes guys get looked off when they have a really good matchup in the post, and Tyrese found it immediately. And Pascal at that point was probably 3 for 8, 3 for 9 or something. And it was no, I got to get my guy the ball, and they got a bucket out of it. So credit to those guys.
Nembhard looking to push early in semi-transition again, gets Jarrett Allen on him, pulls back, and then immediately goes to be the screener so that it's Donovan Mitchell, Jarrett Allen pick and roll, and Tyrese is just making every rainbow in sight now at this point. That's another great one where, Tyrese, a little bit more freedom to be making advanced passes when Okoro and Strus aren't face guarding you. Mitchell had matched up with him in semi-transition. Darius Garland guarding Pascal Siakam in the opposite corner. Another mismatch of sorts. And then even though he didn't finish it there, like you knew things were going right for the Pacers when he could just automatically backpedal and knock down a three. And then I don't know what your thoughts were, but Kenny Atkinson made the decision not to play Ty Jerome until there was 3 minutes left to go in the third quarter. It wasn't the best Ty Jerome series. I'm not saying that was completely unwarranted. But again, when your pick and roll actions aren't really getting you a lot, and Garland and Mitchell looked the way that they did, I thought that that was a somewhat curious decision, especially with Okoro having to also be doing some initiation at times for them whenever one guard or the other wasn't on the floor. But as soon as Jerome came in and started going on his little personal pull-up shooting run, the Pacers were like, well, I think we'll just attack that matchup. Yep. And quite possibly my favorite possession of the game from Tyrese, they did a lot of trying to ice him to the left in this game with their pick and roll coverages, in addition and in combination with some of the blitzing. Ty Jerome purposely trying to force Tyrese to go to his left, and Tyrese was like, you know what, I think I'll just go ahead and do that. Ended up finishing at the rim, which wasn't something you were seeing a lot in the early season, given what his pass out rate was on lefty drives. And then they end up running that stack action. Nesmith actually
love that pickup.
Yes, Nesmith actually sets the stack screen that sticks, and then they're able to go right at Ty Jerome again. So even though he came in and it ends up being a dunk for Tyrese, even though he came in and ended up doing what he did offensively, it was, again, all roads lead to attacking Jerome in terms of the Pacers were like, oh, you came in the game? Well, you're going to have to guard too. So
I thought the decision to move away from Jerome was a good one, actually. And obviously he comes back in, he has his run, but that was his first run of the series, basically. Like, he had the volume in game one. And also there was in past matchups or in past games, Okoro had been able to shapeshift how Tyrese affected the offense and really changed what the Pacers were looking to do. And the Cavs, for like spurts and times in this series, had gotten away with just like one creator and being able to do it. It's just the Pacers had seen a lot from the Cavs to this point. Like, they shredded the zone when they saw it, if I remember correctly. Like, they figured it out. The Pacers did a great job of kind of responding to what they saw over the course of the series from the Cavs. This was Kenny's like last ditch effort, was like, okay, we have to shake it up again. Ty kind of like wiggling and wriggling in the lane has not been effective for us, and went away from it. So yeah, I
think it was kind of a lose-lose situation, because they didn't have a two-way player option. It was either play Okoro and use what he was doing face guarding Tyrese and sacrifice the fact that there's going to be possessions where Tyrese is defending and drop with Okoro as a roller, or that Siakam gets to short close out with Okoro in the corner, or that you're not going to have enough secondary initiation, or it was, Ty Jerome hasn't been the most effective, we'll play him, but the Pacers are going to pick on him at the other end. And also, we're not going to have the same face guarding presence.
Yep.
Even when Ty Jerome's trying to shade Tyrese to the left. Like, again, I don't want to make this the Nembhard podcast, but that's not a question that the Pacers have had to face. With Andrew Nembhard out there, you get the best of both worlds. You can have him running pick and roll when Tyrese isn't doing it, and you still get one of the best defenders in the NBA out on the perimeter. Like, again, that was just a luxury.
I've been famously, like, when Emmanuel quickly got traded to the Raptors, I was not one of the people who thought that he was like an all-star sitting in wait. Although he is a good guard, but I've said many times that I think Nembhard is better. I've been threatened. People are keeping receipts saying that Emmanuel quickly will be better than Nembhard. Good luck, man. I don't know. Oh, Lord. Nembhard is damn good at basketball.
I don't think it's something that people probably would have thought. And like going back to what we were showing about them protecting Tyrese as a five-man group, is that the starting lineup, while there were certainly some slip-ups, particularly in the first quarter at the defensive end, those are all players that can play at both ends of the floor readily.
Weak link, etc., etc. And especially with, we differed, at least in this game, a little bit about how Tyrese is hanging in, not of course over the full season. Miles has his weaknesses, but on the whole, and especially this year, much better than last year. I think like there was some resurgent Miles stuff defensively. You and I have talked about that. Pascal, I think, dynamite defense on the season and like a linchpin to everything they want to do. He and Nembhard probably over the course of the season playing the most important roles. Nesmith, could jump over Siakam for games at a time. Obviously, Nesmith is really strong, and his courageousness as an offensive, like, I'll take the shot, I'll get after it, has been extremely welcome. And Tyrese, they hang in. And TJ has fallen off. So, like, this playoffs, we're not getting as many Obi games, and we're not getting as many TJ games, and we're not getting all that kind of stuff. That's a good thing. The Pacers last year, I do like, there was definitely some like, damn, everyone's getting injured, and there's just these crazy games going on, and there was like this insane aspect to it. But this playoffs, the Pacers are certainly exhibiting far more control with their starting five, and their bench can definitely win minutes, but they're a wholly impressive team that has melded together into a more impressive form than last season. And look for the additions that are there. There aren't any. It's just we figured out more of what makes us work, and we're better now.
And as I mentioned, too, at the top, Jarrett Allen didn't play the last 3 minutes and 59 seconds of this game. So in terms of like talking about playing double big, the Pacers made it so that the Cavs didn't feel comfortable closing double big, in part because of what we were just looking at in that film with Allen involved in some of those actions. But also something that stands out there is that when we're looking at all those clips by comparison to what we looked at with the Cavs going at Tyrese, those aren't very clear, like, Tyrese on the perimeter being like, I want you,
On an
come up
island,
here and I'm calling you up into the action. Those were things that developed naturally within the flow of their offense, although they were good, like we said, in like semi-transition situations, punching the right buttons so that they could get to those matchups. But it was almost like, not that it wasn't intentional, because some of these things very clearly were within their flow, but it was, like I said, it was almost like everything was just naturally a mismatch for them, other than certain things against Dean Wade.
I mean, we talked about it before the Bucks series last year. We're like, when Tyrese was healthy, he was just in the in-season tournament, like Brook Lopez was food. And then he obviously was dealing with injury concerns that changed his whole approach to attack. And, it's been kind of like an odyssey for Tyrese to rediscover things that are coming back to him, and to like that pickup in the lane to get the wide step and then step through for the dunk. Incredible. The contact layup, not only for the finger roll there at the front of the rim, but the transition layup later on in the game is like playing through that physicality. We've talked about this before. He's a big guard and he has long steps. When he starts stepping, and especially when Tyrese is on ball and the Pacers are playing their 5-out style, or even if they're putting, like, let's say Nembhard in the dunker spot or something, when Tyrese, if he can get his guy stepping wide on a manipulative pickup, he can step all the way to the bucket. A lot of things are coalescing here. A lot of things are coming together, and we'll see for the ECF, but good stuff. Very strong.
Let's talk a little bit more about Tyrese and Siakam. Siakam sets 26 picks in this game, the most of any game for him in the playoffs, most of any player for the Pacers in this particular game, and fourth most of any game for him this season. Yep. It didn't necessarily produce robust offense for the Pacers overall with him as the screener or with Tyrese as the ball handler, although, as I told you ahead of this podcast, sometimes things that you and I would say conceptually, that is a pick and roll action, even if Siakam isn't necessarily fully going up and setting a screen, nor was it necessarily a slip.
They're teasing the coverage out.
Yes. It was still creating advantages for the Pacers. So before we look at any of it, why did you think that suddenly in this game that Siakam was so much more of a frequent screener?
Because they wanted to. I thought, and again, we could disagree, and I'm certainly not as close to the Pacers stuff as you are, but to me, it is a message to some degree, is like, we're going to dictate things from the offensive point of view. And like, we really want to focus and feature these guys, especially, I know, like the Pacers, what was their points per possession at the end of the game? Like slightly above average. The Cavs was definitely below average. This was not a run and gun. Like, they got a couple things are going, but this was not a run and gun game necessarily. You have to take the volume, which is why I like the fact that Pascal kind of emptied the clip in this game. It wasn't because, again, he's 64% true shooting coming into this game. Insane efficiency, not enough volume. This game, even though he had like the fourth quarter, you could tell he's gassed a little bit. He had in the first quarter, like not good shooting, but it's like you need that volume. And sometimes the offense doesn't create exactly what you want. So you go to your two best players and ask, even if a pick isn't getting set, we're going to generate a coverage that we think we can deal against. And the points per possession weren't exactly there with it, but it's just like throwing the Cavs or throwing this at the Cavs and saying, like, can you deal with this over and over again? And that can create a ripple effect into other actions down the line. So I just, we haven't seen a ton of it these playoffs, but just going directly into like, we're going to feature our two best guys, I think is meaningful. I like it personally.
I thought part of the biggest reason was, and I think that Miles did make some impactful plays defensively. We won't go back and look at the possession where they gave up the 5-point play and rebounds weren't happening and other things such as that. But because of the way
offensive rebounds in less than 3 minutes.
It was a tough look for a short span. I think part of the reason why they leaned so much more into Siakam was twofold. If there was only one big on the floor, the big was more often guarding Siakam in some of the plays, and that's who they wanted to involve to get them away from the basket so there'd be less rim protection there. Also, I just think that they felt more comfortable with Siakam making plays in the middle of the floor. And as we've talked about many times, maintaining control with the ball, potentially attacking with a live dribble because of how often they were putting two on the ball against Tyrese.
Mm-hmm.
Miles wasn't handling those plays quite as well. So it was like, let's let Siakam do that. So it was almost like an ice to blitz in certain circumstances where they were really forcing Tyrese to the left on the left side of the floor where you can see Strus adjusting his stance there. And then, like we said, that's teasing out of coverage. That's not really Siakam doing anything other than getting out of the way and decongesting what the coverage was for Tyrese, getting that pocket pass, and then him making a pick and pop three against Jarrett Allen. As you said, they did very briefly go to zone in the third quarter, and they automatically went to the flare slip action that we've both liked against the zone where Siakam goes up there and sets the flare and ends up getting into the paint. That's almost going at Jarrett Allen again because he has to come out of the 3-2 in order to account for Tyrese making every shot in sight as he was in this particular game and then getting the ball back and Tyrese making the step back to, his left. That they didn't play any more zone after that. And then, like you said, Siakam slipping out of it again. You're not going to get that same attacking forward momentum with Miles as the screener in the situation as what you can get from Siakam there. And then that's not a screen either. He's just kind of like screening his own man and then slipping out to the top. But to me, that has the intention of a pick and roll action. Very good maintaining both feet to find Aaron up above the corner, and then Nembhard doing a lot of the things that he did in this game where it felt like every time they really needed someone to make a shot, he salvaged some possessions that otherwise would have been broken, although the process there I was totally fine with. I did want to point out that in the first quarter, after he kind of stood behind Dean Wade, there was some intention from Siakam to actually I'm going to challenge this matchup.
Yep.
And he did draw a foul, and he played well enough in the second half that the Pacers played Pascal the entire fourth quarter. I didn't look up how many minutes he had, but he was very close to playing the entire 40. And it reached a point in the fourth where I told you privately, I'm like, I'm getting a little bit nervous because if the Cavs start to figure out that he's completely exhausted, I was a little surprised that they continued to hunt down Tyrese, given what the protections were around him, rather than looking at Siakam. I mean, you can see him as the low man there. He has both of his hands on his shorts. He's bent over. He can't get out to contest that shot at all. He doesn't even make much attempt to. And this isn't me picking on Siakam. It's just the reality. They needed him to this extent. They didn't want to play a game 6. They left him in. They kept playing. And he looked like a player who hadn't played the entire fourth quarter. And you and I have talked about what some of the declines can be and his stamina towards the back end. He had another possession where he kind of tried to drive and had a little bit of an errant pass. And here I was like, maybe you're not really finding the most optimum matchup here when you're ISOing him against Hunter when he's quite that tired. And I was kind of thinking, the rest of the way, if you're not involving one of Garland and or Mitchell, you're probably doing it wrong. But I mean, they end up something that I like so much about Nembhard and the overall just organism that is the Pacers offense is that Siakam can get that mismatch against Strus. And you can see them automatically reorganizing themselves under the basket to be better about how they were occupying help defenders, because Nesmith and Miles Turner exchanged corners
Mm-hmm.
so that Mobley had to be paying attention to that. Nembhard goes to the dunker, and then when he sees that his guy is going to step up to help, backpedals, and it's another case where Cavs only down 3 points at that point in time. Nembhard pushes it back to 6, and then I felt a very key possession. Tyrese just screens. They get Max Strus. Then he gets Darius Garland back, and it's like, yeah, this is what
Huge.
matchup you need. Just go directly at him and get the and one, because there wasn't. It felt like that was what they needed to play through, given what Siakam had already given them in the third quarter and what he was looking like late in the fourth. Where I said, like, this wasn't a lot of just calling people up into action, but it does behoove them that the Pacers can do that when they
Mm-hmm.
need to. It's not their preferred method of play style, but they can, and it was beneficial to them late in the game.
Yeah, and we know that a lot is asked of Pascal. Like it's not just being a low man, but they will frequently just send him out there for full court press.
Yep.
Just go get a guy. And as you said, he not only does he lead them in minutes, like he's listed at 39 minutes. Tyrese is at 36, for example. Tyrese and Nembhard are at 36 and 37. These guys are the biggest motivators for the win in that game. But Pascal playing 39 minutes, being able to do so much, setting all of the screens, like it's just doing whatever you're called upon to do because of the utility, the massive utility of Siakam's versatility. Means that, in some games they're comfortable to be like, you know what, you get 10 shots this game. But in some games they're like, we need 20. We need you to be the hinge in how we attack bigs. We need you to be the low man. We need you to press. And we need it for 39 minutes and basically the whole fourth quarter. Like his substitution pattern was different in this game because they're like, we want this one bad. And now he'll get like a week off, which I think will be extremely important for him.
Yeah, because I mean, as we started out this section, 26 picks for him, fourth most of any game this season. He's doing all that while he's playing that load of minutes. Like it can't be understated, not only how much the Pacers rely on him, but also how much is expected of modern fours in the NBA a lot of times at both ends of the floor to do and wear so many different hats for teams. But
there's a PD Webb tweet about that, which is
yeah.
from years ago, that was like the modern four is like the perfect player. Like, it's like you have to do everything. And because people don't think about like it's not Paul Millsap or Zach Randolph's NBA anymore. And that there's a shift between those two, of course. But it's like if you're a good power forward, not a big three or a small five, but if you're like a good power forward, the laundry list of things that you are asked to do it's a kilometer long. Kilometer, people, not a mile.
One last thing that I wanted to touch on here, because you just talked about how many minutes the starters played in this game. The bench was not super effective in the first half. Overall, TJ had a bit of a rough game. Mathurin had a very rough game in the first quarter, and you didn't necessarily sense his presence that much in the second half either, although the two of them did connect up for a 45 cut, as they're known to do on occasion.
Another flagrant two may have helped the Pacers in that game.
I'm not going to touch that, but after Obi kind of got hunted and had some issues in the first quarter, he and Thomas Bryant combined for about, what was it, a 7-minute stretch to give the Pacers some really quality minutes when they needed them to.
Thomas Bryant getting 3 dunks and banging a corner triple in like a 3-minute stretch. Unbelievable, baby. Because sometimes I watch him on these Pacers and the league had kind of cast him out. Mm-hmm. The league said, but it started to make me remember like, oh yeah, before he was injured, he was this, he was like an offensive center on the Wizards, and then it was all coming back to me. I was like, whoa, it's 2018-19 again. Good for Thomas.
Yeah, because he gets that run out, and then he had finished the dazzling jump pass from Tyrese in transition. And then, like, as I had noted about Obi Toppin being somebody who does a lot without doing too much, there was the possession where he recognized the opportunity to slip the flare against the switch from the Cavs. He caught the pass, and then he made the drop-off pass to Thomas Bryant crashing to the rim. And then also, like you mentioned, Thomas Bryant making the corner three, which this is in part, again, like not to rehash old things, but why I liked Jalen Smith in his role with the Pacers, because it allowed both the starters and the bench to play similarly. when Thomas Bryant's out there, you don't have to change as much because he does very similar things to Miles while not having, the same level of gravity and other things that Miles can do. But you can play stylistically somewhat similar, especially with their ability to use inverse spacing, because that did make Jarrett Allen, who was, hanging around the edge of the paint as a secondary rim protector, then be able to have to close out to him. So I wanted to give
symmetry.
I wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to, I think Rick termed it as, I don't know if you're going to see a better spurt of backup center minutes than what Bryant gave in that little span. And they needed it when they did. They needed better bench minutes than what they got in the first half. And while the starters did do most of the heavy lifting here, and it certainly is reflected in how many minutes they played, that was a key stretch. So we didn't really get to talk about him a lot. Though I do think that next series could potentially give him more opportunities to play even than what we've seen through the first two. Good pickup for the Pacers midway through the season, especially given all the people they tried to cycle through at third string center to cover up for what some of the injuries were early in the year.
Including my sweet darling James. Damn it, James. I wanted to. But I don't know if James Wiseman could have the stretch that Thomas had just now.
I'm guessing probably not. The conditioning and the shooting might have precluded that a little bit. But did you have anything else from this game that you're like, hey, I really wanted to talk about that?
I think that's mostly it. Like, you and I, we just touch on these topics, but because I'm not as focused as you are, I just introduce everything anyway. Like, I don't table it till the end when you're like, Samson, would you like to talk about something? I rudely yell things while you're talking. I go, oh, that's so good. Like.
To be fair, kind of like the Pacers sometimes at the beginning of games, I was a little bit behind the 8 ball with my giving to you of podcast notes and outlines. You didn't get them till 9 this morning versus your usual, 3 or 4 a.m. when certainly you're up looking at that. Yeah. And then we didn't even totally confirm a time because you had to ask, and I was getting ready and didn't even see that I had a text. And I was like, yep, that's when we're doing it.
Yeah. Woke up at like 10:50 a.m. I was like, hell yeah, dude. I'm ready for the day. I looked. There were some notes. I skimmed them. I was ready to podcast.
Okay, so if you have nothing else to add about the actual game, you have lived up to your side of stakes that you voluntarily introduced into this. I promised that if the Pacers won this series at your behest, that I would do a Samson podcast impression.
Hell yeah.
I have already attempted to slowly morph my image to match yours by wearing your podcast t-shirt. I didn't go with the hat because, quite frankly, my hair needed to go up today and it wasn't going to fit under the hat. So I apologize to everyone that a hat will not be included, but I do have, I have my own mic to hold. Are you prepared for the Samson podcast monologue that I've readied myself for?
Let's see it.
Okay, so the other day, I was on the bus to go rock climbing. I was listening to a podcast about carpentry because, as everyone knows, I don't listen to podcasts about basketball, and there's no evidence of this to the contrary. So I was listening to a podcast about carpentry. I'm going to pull the mic away for dramatic effect. They were talking about wood tension, which made me think about the tension between free will and the prophecies that seem to determine the future as a major theme in Dune. And whether and to what degree that applies to both the prevailing fluke and cosmically blessed narratives that have followed this era of the Pacers. Makes you think. Which, yes, there are injuries that have been outside of their control. Certainly. But they've also harnessed control for themselves, ensuring stability with their own play, even when they're up against it, to transform into this multifaceted now would-be contender. Dadgum, oh my days, what a team.
Bellissima. Excellent.
I worked very hard on that.
That's yep. Definitely touching on a lot of things that I introduce as themes. I like that a lot. The Yeah. Thank you for doing that. So there's I've tweeted about this before. This is a special thing about basketball and this podcast, which is very unique in the basketball media landscape. And that, that we're friends to be able to do this. But, I watched a mini documentary on the world's best rock skipper. Have you heard me tell this story before?
I feel like I knew that you watched it, but I don't know where this is going, so feel free to continue. Oh, I forgot that was something I was going to do. When you're going to make a point, you do this a lot too.
It's the facial
I
hair.
always know something important is coming.
Yeah. So basically, he talks about how important it is to specialize in something. And he says, when I tell people I'm the best rock skipper in the world, people scoff at it and, people don't take it seriously. And they're like, what are you going to do with it? And he's like, I just enjoy being excellent at this one thing and giving my human importance to this thing. And he said that like nothing is important, and, importance and special things come when we humans imbue into things meaning, and that like nothing has it without us doing that. And that we can put importance where we want it, and we can highlight things that we want to do. And so, like the rock skipper, I'm very thankful to be doing this podcast where we imbue the basketball into different forms of meaning and understanding for the listeners so that they can enjoy it in the same way that we do. Thank you for the impression.
Well, now I'm a little bit let down because the real Samson monologue was better than my fake Samson monologue.
No, I don't think that's true at all. No, yours
I
was
need to
quite
know
good.
though, like I've never, as you know, I have not read a single word of Dune. I have not seen a single minute of the Dune movies. Was I somewhat on the right track with my comparison?
Oh, definitely. That's obviously the Dune movies are very big now, so, and there will be people who have seen the 2 movies. I won't spoil anything, but the idea of the Golden Path prophecy, obviously people who have watched know that it's been extremely important to date in the movies, and book readers will know that it is basically everything. Prescience, the future prophecy, all of it, whether seen as contrived or divine, is massive motivators of what Dune is. So is hatred for generative AI, let's say. That's the beginning of Dune, by the way, is they don't have any thinking machines. They don't allow anything like that because it was called the Butlerian Jihad, which is they destroyed all thinking machines because they were limiting humanity's capacity. Something to think about.
I'm now getting a bit bothered because the things that you're saying sound like this is a book series that I would probably like. It sounds like there's a lot of theming that I would probably like to discuss. And I've scoffed at it. I've scoffed at it simply because you didn't read my book recommendation.
It is a I think a seminal science fiction book. It is a heavy critique of colonialism, cultism. It is very ecologically focused. It is especially towards the back end of the Frank series, the first 6 books. It is like a deep sitting with philosophy on how humanity organizes and how community organizes, and I love the books. They're great. Yeah.
And you know what else? Thinking about, predetermining the future. Do you all at all buy in the fact that because Tyrese and Jalen Brunson were both in a wrestling ring over the summer, that this was setting the future course of events into motion that we now may be seeing soon in the coming days?
I do. We should do like a short, like this. We should do the first short form video of your YouTube channel with Blake. Like we should do like 10 minutes explaining the wrestling beef between Jalen and Tyrese, if the Knicks make it through, which they should.
I believe I told you to coordinate with Blake. I thought he was going to be on this video.
I can't just make it happen the next day. He has a show 5 days a week. He's probably live right now. We're just finishing up.
I guess
I,
I've just been spoiled because I'm used to being like, oh, I got out of the shower and I'm getting ready and I'm texting Samson 20 minutes before the podcast,
you are spoiled. You know that?
being
You're
like, well,
spoiled.
we're doing this at noon.
I am so hands off, dependable. You're like, can you do this? I'm like, yeah. And then it happens.
How lucky am I?
Yes.
I appreciated that I threw all my days in there as well, because is this like a Canadian thing? You say it a lot. I've not heard anyone say that other than you.
I think my vernacular is kind of like a melting pot. I don't have the hallmarks. I definitely have some of the Canadian accent for sure, although I don't really talk like where I come from necessarily. And I don't talk like I'm from Toronto either. I think I have an eclectic vernacular and manner of speech, probably because my dad is a slow speaker, and I think my vocal quality is similar to his, but also because I was raised by the internet to some degree, and that's the internet monoculture is a big thing that regional dialects are not as prominent anymore because people are kind of raised by the internet rather than their immediate conditions or living spaces. So I have a why do I say day gum and oh my days? I don't think they represent the same region, but I liked them, so I latched onto them.
I think that they're more so just a Samson dialect. I think it fits the
Yeah.
Samsonisms and Samson vocabulary.
There was I'll tell this story. So you referenced the carpentry, and I don't speak like this for any reason other than I guess I liked it, and so I did it. But I speak like this, and I come from a long line of like blue collar jobs, like roofing, flooring, carpentry of different forms, all this kind of stuff, even landscaping. And I was doing roofing with my friend and his dad, and I can't remember what I said. I brought up something about like, well, I think it was to his dialectical materialism. And he looked at me. He was technically the foreman. He said, "Why do you talk like that?" I said, "Sorry, Bernard. I don't know."
That's happened to me a number of times in my lifetime too.
Yep.
We are who we are.
So true.
But we've now completed another round of playoff coverage. How do you feel about a Pacers-Knicks round of playoff coverage again? Funnily enough, when you and I did the mailbag at the end of March, I think we were both like, well, actually, to back it up even further, my friends over at Knicks Film School, one of the only other podcasts I've done with anybody else in this calendar year, I was doing a live with Andrew Claudio, and we got done with it. It was like, well, probably see you again next year. Like, don't think we'll be seeing each other in the playoffs. Have a good rest of the year. And we both kind of discussed the fact that we're like, the Pacers can't guard the Knicks in the way that most limits the Knicks, and the Knicks can't necessarily guard the Pacers in the way that most limits the Pacers. And now both of those things in the playoffs have changed, which I'm sure is something we'll get into. But the Knicks have become more adaptable in guarding in more ways over the prior two rounds, and the Pacers have become more adaptable in scoring against some of the coverages that had previously limited them. So much to discuss and much to think about, but it turns out we will be talking about the New York Knicks again. I was hopeful on this run that we might get to talk about more teams that we didn't necessarily get to talk about, but it turns out that the prophecy of future events said that the Pacers were going to go back against the Bucks and the Knicks again.
Much to consider.
Are you excited to be part of the Pacers-Knicks rivalry yet once more?
That actually happened last year because, as you well know, we would be surprised when, like, I'm not surprised when it happens in the Raptors. Well, I'm a little bit, but like people hate listen to podcasts or they want to gloat under podcasts, which to me is insane because they don't know because like the podcast isn't the team, it's the person. So you and I are not obnoxious gloaters. We're not like in your face rah rah. But people will come into the podcast and be like talking trash, and we're like, do you think we're the Pacers or that we're talking trash the other way? But I remember last year, I can't remember who it was, but Knicks film school after like, I can't remember which game, one of their clips was getting retweeted around because I follow some of the guys. And the guy, I think it was after the Pacers lost, he was like, "Get these losers out of my city." And I was like, "Ooh." I was like, there could be like a podcast rivalry here if we really wanted it. But I don't think that you and I have that in us.
Actually, I mean, I've done a lot of stuff with them over the years, and we have very, like I said, we have very friendly relations. I'm very grateful to the Knicks fan base because they seem to, unlike the Raptors, they seem to enjoy my presence over there. I'm looking forward to being able to do stuff more with Benji over here. It seems like people liked him, so I guess we all kind of have more even demeanored approaches to things. But when I was at the Eastern Conference semifinals series last year, there were Knick fans who had come to Indiana. It wasn't to the extent of what people were seeing in Philly and other places throughout that run. But one of the places where there was Knick fans wearing Carmelo Anthony jerseys and somebody with a Chris Copeland jersey. And I thought, wow, that's a throwback. Showing up with a Chris Copeland jersey after the prior Pacer-Knicks series when Roy Hibbert had the block against Carmelo, and then Chris Copeland eventually playing for the Pacers and being viewed here somewhat as a victory cigar in games. Like this is legit here.
Speaking of end of bench legends, I saw there's murmuring that people are like, we need to get Samson a Ben Sheppard jersey.
Well, I can tell you this fun story about that. So the first Popsicle podcast that I took my sister on, I asked her to answer in the car road trip who her favorite Pacer was. At the time, my sister was not watching mini basketball games. And yet, I can let people know she cut the cord on cable. And because of that, she can't see these playoff games. And she keeps being like, "Can I come over to your house to watch the game?" So she's there. But at the time, I asked her, like, who's your favorite Pacer? And she was like, probably Tyrese Haliburton. I'm like, okay, so this is like the person in Sunday school who doesn't know the answer to the question. It's just like, Jesus? She's just like Tyrese Haliburton. But over the past 2 years, she has come to really beloved Ben Sheppard. I go into the team store regularly trying to get my sister Ben Sheppard attire as somewhat of a joke, an inside joke between the two of us. They do not sell. The last time I was there, there's never anything specific to Ben Sheppard unless you want to buy like a custom jersey. They have t-shirts for pretty much everybody else. It would be tough, Samson, for you to be able to find this.
This is the hate. This is the mustache hate. And this is why it's such a big deal for me to shave it away and embrace it. Also, you use the term beloved. I forgot to mention this. Obviously, hello, I'm Samson Folk. I cover the Toronto Raptors in person and credentialed most of the time. I know OG Anunoby. I know Pascal Siakam. And also, both those men were referred to as beloved by Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry would famously refer to Pascal and OG as his beloved when they were in Toronto together, and my beloved. And so this is, somebody tweeted this, the beloved bowl would be OG versus Pascal. Would be pretty good.
If both sides can stay healthy, let's hope for this. This time go around.
Fingers are crossed.
Well, we'll talk a lot more about the Pacers and Knicks in the coming days and perhaps weeks, depending upon how that particular series goes. Samson, I'll let you say whatever else you want to say, or you can go right into your goodbye phrase if you would like.
Like the podcast, it helps spread it to other people who will learn that the reason why Pascal was setting so many screens is because they wanted to get the bigs up into the action so that there wasn't as much help at the rim. That they're going to learn that second spectrum, which they probably don't have access to, but second spectrum may not accurately identify every single screen. So the points per possession might not include a 3-point shot from Pascal Siakam, but this is the outcome anyway. And it gets filtered down farther so that somebody tweets out points per possession. Who knows? They will learn about the different forms of coverages that the Pacers were playing to keep Tyrese in things and out of things. They will learn about the machinations of what's going on in a playoff series. I doubt very highly, and this is because of Caitlin, I doubt very highly that there is coverage of any other series in the NBA. Actually, I'll guarantee that has this level of attention to detail. because of Caitlin Cooper. Her Patreon is Basketball She Wrote. If you have the means, support her and myself by extension. And you can subscribe over at patreon.com/basketball she wrote. I don't know if that's exactly it. Just Google it. And thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you so very much. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.